I have watched thousands of people walk through my courtroom doors over 4 decades on the bench, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. The moment someone thinks they are above the law is the exact moment justice must prove them wrong. Money cannot buy back time, designer labels cannot erase consequences, and no amount of privilege can shield you from the truth when it stands up and speaks. Are you ready to see what happens when someone who has everything learns that accountability does not care about your bank account? Because what unfolded in my courtroom on the morning of October 17, 2023, reminded me why I took this oath in the first place. It was a Tuesday morning in my municipal courtroom in San Diego, California, and the autumn sunlight was cutting through the high windows in sharp golden lines. My clerk had just handed me the docket sheet, and one case number stood out. Case number 2023 TR 8847. The charge was vehicular assault with aggravating factors, DUI with injury, and leaving the scene of an accident. I have seen plenty of drunk driving cases in my career, but something about the notes clipped to this file told me today was going to be different. My bailiff, Officer Mendez, who had worked with me for over 15 years, glanced at me and raised his eyebrows slightly. He knew it too. I could feel it in the air, that electric tension that comes before a storm. The courtroom was filling up with the usual morning crowd, attorneys shuffling papers, a few reporters in the back rows, family members clutching tissues, and then I saw her. The defendant walked in like she owned the building. Her name was Gabrielle Ashford, age 24, and everything about her screamed wealth and entitlement. She wore a cream-colored Balenciaga blazer over a silk blouse, and her handbag was a black Hermes Birkin that probably cost more than most people in that room made in 6 months. Her heels clicked against the tile floor with sharp, dismissive authority. She had long blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, oversized Chanel sunglasses perched on top of her head, and a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light every time she moved her wrist. On her other wrist was a rose gold Cartier watch that I estimated was worth at least $15,000. She did not look nervous. She looked annoyed. Behind her sat a man in his late 50s wearing a custom-tailored navy suit and a Rolex presidential watch. That was her father, Gregory Ashford, a real estate developer with connections all over Southern California. I had heard his name before in political fundraising circles and on the boards of several nonprofit organizations. He sat with his arms crossed, staring straight ahead, radiating the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Gabrielle slid into her seat beside her attorney, a sharp-dressed defense lawyer named Martin Keller, who had a reputation for getting rich clients out of trouble. He wore a charcoal gray suit with a burgundy tie and gold cufflinks, and he carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my first car. She leaned back in her chair, scrolled through her phone for a moment, then tucked it into her purse with a sigh. She was bored. That told me everything I needed to know about how seriously she was taking this. On the other side of the aisle sat the victim. His name was Staff Sergeant Daniel Ortega, age 32, and he was a United States Marine Corps veteran with 11 years of service. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, and he carried himself with the kind of quiet dignity that only comes from facing real danger and choosing honor every single time. He wore a simple gray button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans, and his posture was ramrod straight, even though I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. His right arm was in a sling, and there was a fading bruise along his jawline that had turned from purple to a sickly yellow-green. Beside him sat his wife, Maria, holding their 5-year-old daughter on her lap. The little girl had a pink backpack covered in unicorn stickers, and she kept looking up at her father like he was the whole world. Staff Sergeant Ortega worked full-time as a logistics coordinator for a veteran services nonprofit while attending night classes to finish his degree in accounting. He did not have a high-powered attorney. He had a victim advocate from the district attorney's office sitting beside him, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. My clerk called the court to order, and everyone rose. I took my seat and looked out over the room. The contrast between these two sides could not have been sharper. On one side, privilege and impatience. On the other, sacrifice and quiet strength. I opened the file in front of me, and began to read the incident report aloud to make sure everyone understood what we were here to address. On the night of September 29, 2023, at approximately 10:47 p.m., Officer James Caldwell, badge number 4429, responded to a collision at the intersection of Pacific Coast Highway and La Jolla Boulevard. A silver Lamborghini Urus, registered to Gabrielle Ashford, had run a red light at high speed and struck a 2015 Honda Accord driven by Staff Sergeant Daniel Ortega. The impact had been severe enough to deploy both airbags in the Honda and spin the vehicle into a streetlight pole. Witnesses reported that the Lamborghini did not stop immediately. It continued for another 2 blocks before finally pulling over. When Officer Caldwell arrived on scene at 10:52 p.m., he found Staff Sergeant Ortega still inside his vehicle, dazed and bleeding from a laceration above his right eye. His right shoulder had been dislocated in the crash. His car was totaled. The front end was completely caved in, the windshield was shattered, and fluids were leaking onto the pavement. Officer Caldwell immediately called for medical assistance and then walked back to locate the Lamborghini. He found Gabrielle Ashford standing beside her vehicle, which had minor front bumper damage but was still drivable. She was on her phone, and according to the officer's report, she did not ask about the other driver. She did not ask if anyone was hurt. She was arguing with someone on the phone about whether her car could be driven home or needed to be towed. Officer Caldwell noted in his report that she smelled strongly of alcohol. Her speech was slurred and her eyes were bloodshot. When he asked her to perform a field sobriety test, she refused and said, quote, "Do you know who my father is?" Officer Caldwell administered a portable breathalyzer test after she finally agreed under threat of arrest. Her blood alcohol content was 0.14, nearly twice the legal limit. She was placed under arrest at 11:18 p.m. and transported to the station. Staff Sergeant Ortega was taken by ambulance to Scripps Memorial Hospital, where he was treated for a dislocated shoulder, a concussion, 3 bruised ribs, and multiple lacerations. His vehicle was declared a total loss. He had been on his way home from his evening class at San Diego State University. He was 3 blocks from his apartment. 3 blocks. That is all that separated him from walking through his front door, kissing his daughter goodnight, and going to bed. Instead, he spent the night in the emergency room and the next 6 weeks in physical therapy, unable to work, unable to hold his child with both arms, and unable to pay his rent without borrowing money from family. I looked up from the report and let the silence settle over the courtroom. Staff Sergeant Ortega sat perfectly still, his jaw tight. His wife reached over and squeezed his good hand. Gabrielle Ashford looked at her nails. Her attorney whispered something to her, and she nodded without looking up. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest, the kind that comes when you know someone is not taking this seriously, and you know that your job is to make them understand that this courtroom is not an inconvenience, it is a reckoning. I have been a judge for 42 years. My father was a judge before me, and he taught me that the courtroom is the one place where everyone stands equal, no matter who they are or where they come from. He used to say that justice is not about making people comfortable, it is about making people accountable. I have never forgotten that lesson, and I was about to make sure Gabrielle Ashford learned it too. The prosecution was being handled by Deputy District Attorney Laura Kim, a sharp and thorough prosecutor in her late 30s who had built her career on DUI cases. She had a conviction rate of over 90%, and she did not lose cases because she cut corners. She stood up and approached the bench with a file folder in her hands. She began by summarizing the charges: 1 count of DUI causing injury, 1 count of reckless driving, 1 count of leaving the scene of an accident with injury, and 1 count of refusing to comply with a lawful order. Each charge carried its own penalties, but together they painted a picture of someone who had made a series of choices that night, each one worse than the last. Deputy D.A. Kim called Officer Caldwell to the stand first. He was a veteran patrol officer with 18 years on the force, a man who had testified in my courtroom dozens of times. I trusted his word. Officer Caldwell took the stand, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Deputy DA Kim asked him to describe what he found when he arrived at the scene. He spoke in the calm, professional tone of someone who has done this 1,000 times. He said he immediately noticed the severity of the damage to the Honda and the fact that the driver was still inside, injured and disoriented. He said the airbag had deployed and there was broken glass everywhere. The driver's side door was crumpled inward, and the front axle was bent at an angle that made it clear the car would never drive again. He said the victim was conscious, but clearly in pain, holding his right shoulder and struggling to focus his eyes. He said he called for paramedics immediately and then went to locate the other vehicle. He said when he found the Lamborghini 2 blocks away, the driver was not injured, not panicked, and not concerned. She was irritated. He testified that when he made contact with Miss Ashford, she was more concerned about the cosmetic damage to her vehicle than the welfare of the person she had just hit. He said she kept asking if the front bumper could be fixed quickly because she had plans that weekend. He said when he asked her if she had been drinking, she rolled her eyes and said she had a glass of wine at dinner. He said he could smell alcohol on her breath from 3 feet away, and her eyes were glassy and unfocused. He testified that her refusal to take the sobriety test initially, combined with her physical symptoms and the smell of alcohol, gave him probable cause to arrest her. He said her exact words when he informed her she was under arrest were, quote, "This is ridiculous. My lawyer will have this thrown out by morning. Do you have any idea who you are messing with?" Deputy DA Kim then asked Officer Caldwell if he had recovered any other evidence from the scene. He said yes. He had taken photographs of both vehicles, the skid marks on the pavement, the traffic signal showing red in the direction Miss Ashford had been traveling, and the debris field that extended over 30 feet. He also said that a bystander had recorded part of the incident on their cell phone and had provided that video to the police. The video showed the Lamborghini running the red light at what traffic reconstruction specialists later estimated to be 62 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. It showed the moment of impact, the Honda spinning violently to the right, the sound of metal crunching and glass shattering. It showed the Honda crashing into the pole with such force that the pole bent. And it showed the Lamborghini continuing down the street without stopping for more than 100 yards. The courtroom was silent. I saw Staff Sergeant Ortega close his eyes for a moment. His wife looked down at their daughter and stroked her hair gently. Gabrielle Ashford shifted in her seat and whispered something to her attorney, who nodded and made a note on his legal pad. I could see her father in the back row leaning forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Deputy DA Kim thanked Officer Caldwell and then called her next witness. It was a woman named Rebecca Huang, age 41, who had been stopped at the red light in the lane next to Staff Sergeant Ortega when the crash happened. She was a dental hygienist on her way home from a late shift at a clinic in Point Loma. She had seen everything. Rebecca Huang took the stand and described what she saw. She said the Lamborghini came out of nowhere going so fast that she did not even have time to honk or react. She said the impact was so loud she thought a bomb had gone off. She said her whole car shook from the force of it. She said she immediately dialed 911 and then got out of her car to check on the driver of the Honda. She said she saw him slumped over the steering wheel, blood running down his face, and she stayed with him until the ambulance arrived. She said she kept talking to him, asking him his name, trying to keep him awake and alert. She said he told her his name was Daniel, and he kept asking if the other driver was okay. She said she also saw the Lamborghini keep driving and thought the driver was fleeing the scene. She said when the police arrived and she saw the driver of the Lamborghini standing there on her phone looking unbothered, she could not believe it. She said, quote, "I have never seen someone care so little about the harm they just caused. It was like she hit a shopping cart, not a person." That testimony hit hard. I saw a few people in the gallery shaking their heads. The reporters were writing furiously. Staff Sergeant Ortega's wife wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I looked over at Gabrielle Ashford, waiting for some flicker of remorse, some sign that she understood the weight of what she had done. Nothing. She stared straight ahead, expressionless, like she was waiting in line at the DMV. That bothered me more than anything. I have seen people break down in my courtroom out of guilt, out of fear, out of shame. I have seen people beg for mercy, But I have also seen people who think they are untouchable, and that is the most dangerous kind of defendant, because they do not learn until the consequences are unavoidable. Deputy DA Kim continued building her case. She introduced medical records from Scripps Memorial Hospital showing the extent of Staff Sergeant Ortega's injuries. She showed photographs of his shoulder x-rays, the joint completely out of its socket, the ligaments torn. She showed photographs of the bruising across his ribs, dark purple streaks that spread across his entire right side. She showed the stitches above his eye, 12 in total, running in a jagged line across his eyebrow. She introduced repair estimates for his Honda showing the vehicle was worth $8,000 before the crash and was now worth nothing. The insurance adjuster had declared it a total loss within hours of inspecting it. She introduced pay stubs showing that he had missed 6 weeks of work while recovering, costing him over $4,200 in lost income. She introduced a letter from his employer confirming that his position was hourly and that he had no paid leave available. She introduced billing statements from the hospital showing over $19,000 in medical expenses, some of which his veterans' benefits covered, but some of which were still outstanding and being sent to collections. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the wall, and that wall was closing in on Gabrielle Ashford, whether she realized it or not. Deputy DA Kim also introduced photographs of Staff Sergeant Ortega's injuries taken the night of the crash. His face was covered in blood. His eyes were unfocused. He looked like he had just walked off a battlefield, and in a way he had. Except this time, the enemy was not a foreign combatant. It was a drunk driver in a $100,000 car who thought the rules did not apply to her. Then Deputy DA Kim did something I was not expecting. She asked Staff Sergeant Ortega to take the stand. He stood slowly, favoring his right side, and walked to the witness box. He raised his left hand because his right arm was still in the sling, and he swore to tell the truth. His voice was steady but quiet. Deputy DA Kim asked him to describe what happened that night in his own words. He said he was driving home after his accounting class at San Diego State. He said the class ended at 10:15 p.m. and he left campus at 10:30 p.m. He said traffic was light and he was listening to a podcast about financial planning. He said he was 3 blocks from his apartment and stopped at a red light. He said he remembers checking his phone to see if his wife had texted him. She had not. He said he put the phone back in the cup holder and waited for the light to change. He said he remembers seeing the green light for cross traffic, and then he remembers a flash of silver and the feeling of being hit by a train. He said the next thing he knew, he was waking up in the hospital with his wife standing over him crying. He said his first thought was that he had been deployed again, that he was back in Afghanistan and something had gone wrong. He said it took him a few minutes to realize where he was. He said his daughter asked him why he had a boo-boo and if the bad guy was going to jail. He said he did not know how to answer her. He said he told her that sometimes people make bad choices and those choices hurt other people, and that there are rules to make sure people are held responsible. He said she asked if the bad guy was sorry, and he said he did not know. Deputy DA Kim asked him how the crash had affected his life. He paused for a long moment, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. He said he had spent 11 years in the Marine Corps serving his country, and he had been in firefights, roadside bomb explosions, and situations where he did not know if he was going to make it home. He said he had lost friends. He said he had seen things that still kept him up at night. He said he had come home in one piece, and he had worked hard to build a stable life for his family. He said he worked full-time at a nonprofit that helped veterans find jobs and housing. He said he went to school at night because he wanted to be able to provide more for his wife and daughter. He said he volunteered on weekends at a veterans center, helping other guys transition back to civilian life. He said he was 2 semesters away from finishing his degree. He said the crash took all of that away in an instant. He said he could not work for 6 weeks because he could not lift anything with his right arm. He said he could not type, could not drive, could not even tie his shoes without help. He said he missed classes because he was in too much pain to sit through a lecture. He said his wife had to take extra shifts as a nurse's aide at a senior care facility to cover rent. He said they had to borrow $3,000 from his parents, who were already on a fixed income and living on Social Security. He said his daughter stopped sleeping through the night because she kept having nightmares about her daddy being hurt. He said the worst part was not the pain or the financial strain. The worst part was feeling helpless. He said he had trained his whole adult life to protect people, to be strong, to be dependable, and suddenly he could not even pick up his own child. And here is the part that stuck with me. He looked directly at Gabrielle Ashford and said, "I do not hate you, ma'am. I do not know you, but I need you to understand that your choices that night did not just damage my car, they damaged my life. They damaged my family. My daughter is 5 years old, and she should not have to worry about whether her dad is going to be okay. My wife should not have to work double shifts because we cannot pay our bills. I should not have to drop out of school because I missed too many classes recovering from injuries that never should have happened. And I need to know that you understand that. I need to know that this means something to you." His voice did not waver. He did not raise it. He did not cry. He just spoke the truth with the same calm discipline that had carried him through a decade of military service. It was one of the most powerful moments I have ever witnessed in my courtroom, and I have been doing this job for over 40 years. I looked at Gabrielle Ashford. For the first time, I saw a crack in her mask. She blinked a few times and looked down at the table. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something to her. She nodded slightly but did not look up. Deputy D.A. Kim thanked Staff Sergeant Ortega, and he returned to his seat. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. I called for a 15-minute recess because I needed everyone to take a breath. What came next was going to determine how this case ended, and I wanted to make sure I gave it the attention it deserved. I also wanted to give Gabrielle Ashford a chance to think about what she had just heard. Sometimes people need a moment to let the truth sink in. Sometimes they do not. When we reconvened, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. People were no longer settling into their seats casually. They were leaning forward, waiting. I could feel the anticipation. Deputy D.A. Kim stood and said she had additional evidence to present that had come to light during the investigation. She approached the bench with her tablet in hand and asked permission to display digital evidence on the courtroom monitor. I granted the request, and the screen on the side wall flickered to life. What appeared on that screen made my blood run cold, and I have seen a lot in my time on this bench. It was a screenshot from an Instagram story posted by Gabrielle Ashford on the night of the crash. The timestamp read 11:52 p.m. on September 29, 2023, less than 90 minutes after the collision and only 34 minutes after she had been arrested and booked. The post showed a photo of her sitting in the back of a police car, taken as a selfie, with a caption that read, "Worst night ever. Can't believe I have to deal with this. Ugh." She was pouting in the photo. She had a filter on that added sparkles around her face and made her eyes look bigger. There were 3 laughing, crying emojis at the end of the caption. The courtroom erupted. I heard gasps, whispers, and at least one person in the back say, "Are you kidding me?" Someone else said, "Unbelievable." I banged my gavel and called for order. I stared at that screen and felt a level of disbelief that I rarely experience. This woman had just put a decorated war veteran in the hospital, totaled his car, and derailed his life, and her first instinct was to post a selfie complaining about the inconvenience. Deputy D.A. Kim let that image sit on the screen for a long moment before moving to the next slide. It was another Instagram story from the following morning, October 1st. This one showed Gabrielle having brunch at a trendy restaurant in La Jolla. The photo showed a table with mimosas, avocado toast, and a fruit plate arranged like it belonged in a magazine. The caption read, "Mimosas make everything better. Lawyer says this will all go away. Daddy's got it handled." She was smiling in the photo. She had a champagne flute raised to the camera. She looked like she did not have a care in the world.